Hi, this is Baby Boomer Tales. My name's Jim. I am very, very glad you're here. Let's just take a little trip for the next 15 minutes. I hope you enjoy it. I hope I can tell it right. If you find through time that I'm repeating myself or my stories change a little, it's just that I'm 68 years old and they may change a little and I may say the same thing a few times. But that should be all good. It's all good with me. What I want to go back in time today is when I was 17 years old. It was the summer before my senior year of high school. On the last episode, I talked about hitchhiking. But that trip to New Orleans was not my first venture in hitchhiking. I'd hitchhiked from small town to small town. I'd even hitchhiked to Denver from my small town in Colorado and back. I was very adventurous, and I thought that that was a great adventure. I'm sure I drove my parents crazy. If it had been in this day and age and I'd been missing for several days, there'd been Amber Alerts and front page news all over social media. But in 1967, I was just some wild kid trying to sow some oats, trying to prove to myself that I was a man in a very strange way, I might add. But I did what I did. I'm neither ashamed nor proud of it. It's what I did. It's part of what shaped me. It took me to many places that I have fond memories of and many dark places. I feel fortunate to be alive today at 68 through all the stuff I saw, did, went through, experienced. Looking back, I probably should have just got a job and worked, but I wouldn't be making this today. I'd probably be soaking my toes in Margaritaville with all the other retired 68-year-olds out there. That doesn't sound like a bad plan. If you're doing that, more power to you. But I'm sitting here in my office looking out my window, and it's kind of a snowy, wet snow day. Haven't seen the sun today. That's okay. I like winter. Gives me a chance to stay inside and not go outside and get cold. I'm calling this episode Age 17, and I took a little trip. Why don't you come with me, and let's see what we can go through. I always worked at my dad's grocery store, and I resented it in a lot of ways, but it taught me a great work ethic, and it gave me a certain amount of freedom. Well, it was about August 1967, and I was always wanting to grow my hair long, at least like the Beatles. I thought that was long hair. I like to kind of whip my neck and flip my hair in my eyes so they kind of go around my eyebrows or something. And I'd stand around for hours just whipping my neck, whipping my head, whooshing my hair, thinking I was cool. But my dad said, you have to get a haircut. I don't want a haircut. You have to get a haircut. I'm sure it was touching my ears and touching my eyebrows, getting a little fuzzy in the back, and I was probably growing sideburns and all that. So he told me to walk down to the barber shop and not come home until I got a haircut. To me, that was a loophole that was standing wide open for me. So I walked down the street, and I walked past the barber shop, and I probably waved to my uncle, the barber, in there. And I kept walking east until I got to the end of town, and I stuck out my thumb, and I got a ride almost immediately to Denver. I made my way to a hospital in Denver. I had a girlfriend, and she had an operation, so I went and saw her for the day. My mom did call sometime during the day, and I had convinced her to please lie for me and tell her that I was not there. Later that night, I went to the bus station. I bought a bus ticket for the first stop in Kansas. It was a little town called St. Francis, Kansas, and I rode that bus for hours. And in the middle of the night or in the early morning, it stopped and let me off in St. Francis, Kansas. Some little old lady was there, and she said, come over to my house, I'll make you breakfast. And I did, and it was great. And then I started hitchhiking. I started hitchhiking north, and I hitchhiked to Nebraska. And on my way to Nebraska, at one of my stops where a car had let me off. There was some guy hitchhiking there at this intersection out in the middle of nowhere. And he claimed he worked in the circus and he was going to go to some circus and work. And he offered that I could come with him, but I didn't trust him. I didn't feel good about him. He's just a little bit oily, if you know what I mean. And I passed. So we did go separate ways. He went one way and I either went north or west. And I remember a couple of the rides I got in Nebraska. One was from a salesman. And we stopped in a town and he had to get his tires rerounded. And I remember watching a machine that actually was cutting rubber off of them, and it was like a big tire lathe or something. It was really fascinating. I've never seen that before or since. But anyway, long story short, I made myself keep going, and I ended up in Wyoming in the middle of the night on some highway that big trucks were going by. And I did make it through Wyoming and then down back into Colorado. And I stayed with some relatives. No, I went to Utah. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I went to Utah. And I stayed with some relatives for a few days. And my aunt and uncle were very, very nice people and would always take me in. And they wouldn't question my decisions, although they were very concerned for my parents worrying. And when I left there, I made it back into Colorado. And the last ride I received before I got back to my home, and I was gone for a week. I mean, I didn't just do all this in a day. I was gone a week. I slept in fields and stayed at my aunt and uncle's and thought I was really, Kit Carson or some mountain man out there blazing new trails. So I was hitchhiking, some 17-year-old kid hitchhiking. And the last ride I received was from 4 long-haired guys from Detroit. And they started smoking pot. And they offered me some pot. And I remember my reaction immediately because I thought pot was great from everything I read about it, and heard about it, and dreamed about. But I had never tried it. And I declined their offer and I said, no, thank you. I'm going to smoke pot someday. But right now I'm going back to get a haircut and start football practice. I'm sure they thought I was crazy, which I was, but I didn't want to do that yet. I wanted to go home and play football. I want to go back home, be with my mom and dad and my brothers and my sister. I want to go back home and go to school and have a normal senior year of high school. And that sounds really weird and nobody probably could relate with that from all my friends and relatives and family. But that's how I thought. So I went and got a haircut, then I went home. And I remember walking up the road to the house, and I wasn't in trouble, and I wasn't grounded forever, and I didn't get beat. I didn't get yelled at. It's kind of like the prodigal son, that story, and the guy leaves and parties it up and spends all his money, and then he comes home and the dad welcomes him with open arms. Well, I'm not sure my dad's arms were open, but they sure weren't closed. And I hunkered down that senior year of high school and made good grades, played good football. Did have one little lapse where I took off again for a couple days, but that's for another day. As I got older and I did leave home, I did get into drugs. And I'd have been better off staying home playing football. But you just can't do that after you graduate from high school. Well, I was going to go to junior college and play football, but I was not ambitious. My ambitions were in a different direction. My ambition was to be adventurous and see the world and do all that. And I thought, well, I'll go back to school and play football and all that later after I sow these wild oats. Never do that. Never, ever do that. Because it just doesn't happen usually. And it didn't happen. I went off and I became very, very crazy with the peace love movement, the free love, what my generation went through concerning the Vietnam War and Haight-Ashbury and Woodstock. And I think it was good for me to do that because I really could relate with people later that had problems with situations like drugs. 'Cause I did. I don't think I really had a problem, but I was very, very much into it, and it almost boomeranged back on me and could have killed me. And I was very fortunate. I've always been fortunate where I wasn't a heroin addict or wasn't addicted in any way. And when I stopped, and thank goodness for that. But speaking to baby boomers right now, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about with the drugs and the free love, which nothing's free, by the way. It was the 1960s, and we all thought we knew better than our elders. That's probably no different than today. But the older I get, the more I know that I don't know very much. I know very little. I know more than I did when I was 17, though. And I know my dad and my mom knew a whole lot more than I did. And for them to receive me as their son instead of reject me forever was amazing. Now, I wasn't mean-spirited, and I didn't threaten them. I was not a menace to society, but I tested their patience. I was known as the first hippie to come out of this town of 500 people. And for a very, very long time, even when I was in my 40s and in the business, and people would remind me of that. I was the first hippie there. I was at a funeral of one of my uncles a couple years ago, and a friend of mine, that his dad would always go around saying, Jim was the first hippie here. And he reminded me of that, and we laughed about it, and it's just amazing how you can remember some of this stuff. So when I'm talking to you, I'm not thinking of some little old lady sitting in a nursing home, some man that's all alone because his wife died, and he's sitting here in a small apartment, lonely as can be. A couple that everything worked out for them, and they get to travel the world, and maybe their children don't understand where they're coming from. When I think of you, I think of that 22-year-old guy that had hair to his shoulders and a scraggly little beard giving me the peace sign. Or a young woman with flowers in her hair and long blonde with no shoes on and some kind of psychedelic skirt. But now we're not looking like that anymore. But there's part of us, part of something in us that will never get away from that. I want to give you memories that will help you remember. I want to give you stories that will make you laugh. I want to be here if you need me, because I need you. I know that. I'm experiencing the same things. Children and grandchildren, lack of and abundance of, friends that I get to see and friends that are dead and gone. Some of us were in Vietnam, some of us weren't. Some of us were at peace rallies, and some of us, we don't even remember. I hope you remember. God gave us that to remember. Well, this is my second show. I don't like the name show. It's my second tale of a boy that hitchhiked all about 5 states just so he didn't have to get a haircut for a week. I showed them, didn't I? I really showed them. I don't know. Maybe it showed me. It showed me how special my parents were and how they loved me unconditionally. It showed me that through the grace of God, I made it through it, because you never know, hitchhiking, what could happen to you. All my stories are not going to be about hitchhiking, but I did a lot of it for a while, and so there will be stories of me hitchhiking. I would never do it again, and I don't pick up hitchhikers. I know. I'm a hypocrite, but I used to pick up hitchhikers. Thank goodness I have a car that if I had to, I could. Well, that'll do it for today, and always, always remember to be kind. This is Jim. Peace out.